So the title of my presentation is, Should You Touch the Footboard? The Science of Decision Making. So I'm gonna disappoint a lot of you because I'm gonna talk mostly about decision making. If you don't know the answer to the question there for the residents, you'll find out soon enough. So why am I talking about this? So decision making, whether you realize it or not, it's, you make decisions every day, from as small as, pressing the snooze button on the alarm, choosing what you want for lunch versus, is something more important, like whether or not you're taking the patient to the OR. So I thought it'd be helpful to know some of these biases, and you may be able to use it on your daily basis. I also took a good amount of neuroscience classes as an undergraduate. I majored in biology with neuroscience focus. So I thought some of these concepts are very interesting and would like to share them. And like I said here, interesting and applicable and demonstrable concepts and principles. There are lots of pictures, videos. So less of me talking, more of the videos, hopefully. And then on a personal level, as an introvert, I like observing people, see why somebody do what they do. I think well, that's very helpful for me because I try to predict their behavior, and some level it's very helpful in terms of residency. It's hopefully it led to less yelling from the attendings. So that's that. Decision making. So this is one of the better definition that I found. It's basically a process in which we use to identify a problem, weigh the different options, make a final choice, and that may result in an action or it may not. It's a problem-solving activity. Technically, there's no right or wrong answer to your decision, but somebody else can perceive the decision as rational or irrational based on what the values and the beliefs or the knowledge of the person that's making the decision. So somebody who makes a decision against their values or beliefs, then you would say that's irrational. So the science of decision making, it's a multidisciplinary field. It combines neuroscience, psychology, behavioral science, mathematics, analytical science. You'll see later on down the talk, I have concepts from each of these fields. It's fairly new. It's not really well understood. There's lots of unknown. People are still studying it. So initially, the goal was to find a neuron, one-to-one connection neuron. They think that this neuron will fire and you'll make a certain decision. Obviously, we know that's not true. It's more of a circuit. And as you'll see later, the process is so complicated and there's so many variables, and that's why people are still learning about it. And there's wide applicable use for this. So the more we know about decision making, we can help people. For example, in healthcare, see why certain people choose, like in the picture, exercising versus binge eating. And business economics, they use it for advertisement. So why people buy certain things and buy certain brands. And in education, obviously, that's very important. So there are multiple models for decision making, but this is one example of it. But in all the models, in terms of kind of the similarities, there's always some sort of a sensory receptor where you get information from the environment. It gets transferred to the higher processing unit, some sort of decision makers. And then once you make your decision, it goes to, your motor neurons, or, if you're performing an action, and then that's how it leads to your behavior. And then, so in terms of the sensory, you would think that the stimulus that you get from outside hospital is pretty objective. Green is green, You know, bad smelling is bad smelling, you know, food tastes good. But it's actually more variable to that. So this is an optical illusion. So most people would say that this line is longer than this one. But you know, if you draw a straight line, it's actually the same line. Same with this one. If you kind of look at the center, you'll see the picture moving, even though it's not. And then lastly, if you compare the A and the B, they're actually the same color, even though it looks like it's a different shade of gray. What I'm trying to say here is, oh, also this one. Here you see a triangle, even though there's no line, but your brain makes an inference that there is a triangle there. But the whole point here is that, you know, even the stimulus that we get from outside hospital or outside world, it's variable. So a little bit of science behind these optical illusions. We see actually with both our brain and our eyes. So information start from the neurons in the retina, go all the way to the thalamus and the visual cortex in the back of your head, and then it gets processed and then ultimately sent to the higher processing unit in the prefrontal cortex. But what most people don't know is some of these information actually gets sent back to the visual cortex, and this feedback mechanism is what they think is responsible for the optical illusion that we see, why we see things that are not there, but you know, our brain thinks it's there. So, sometimes in terms of the sensory system, it elicits automatic response. So some of these things that we don't really necessarily make decisions on. One of the things is called habituation. Basically, if you have repeated sensory information that's not really pertainable to you, or it doesn't affect you, then your brain automatically just tones down that sensory input. So an example of this in the hospital is the kind of alarm from the IV pole. Most of the time, you just don't notice it anymore. And then here, neck fash. So when you first go into the room, you get this whiff of, you know, foul smelling things. But as you progress during the operation, well, hopefully you clean the area, which helps. But your brain just tones down that smell, and it doesn't smell as bad. And there's actually opposite also. So sometimes you get a response, and it after a stimulus, and it actually elicits a response. And the response is obviously important to the observer. That's why it elicits a response, and then it's automatic and physiologic. And the degree of the response depends on the temporary interval between the actual stimulus and the consequence of the stimulus. The classical example is the Pavlovian conditioning, where you ring a bell to a dog and feed the dog food, and then it salivates. And then after a certain amount of time, you just ring the bell and the dog will automatically salivate. Here, in terms of kind of personal experience, you get the stimulus, the text. This is a bad string of months here. But you get an automatic response. Well, a little sweat. Yeah, correct. A little sweat in your hands, a little hoarseness in the voice when you call. But so there's that. For the next kind of principle, so this is a fairly old video, but it's a classic one. If you guys know the video, don't ruin it for other people. But so the instruction here is to count how many times the players wearing white t-shirt pass the basketball. If you guys can watch and count really carefully, because it's very tricky.
How many passes did you count?
So anybody has the answer?
The correct answer is 15 passes.
Right.
But did you see the gorilla?
Hello.
This video is from research by Daniel.
So, well, this brings me to my next point is that, so after you perceive the stimulus from the environment, then your brain processes it. But sometimes before it even gets to the processing center, your brain automatically weeds out all the unnecessary information. So in that particular case, I don't know how many of you guys saw the gorillas, but when I first saw the video, I didn't see the gorillas because you were so focused on counting the basketball. So yeah, this is another concept, and I thought it was pretty interesting. The competing information can be externally, like the external stimulus, or internally if you have different thoughts in your head. And in terms of the kind of brain region that they thought is responsible for this is the frontoparietal network. And the activity is actually fairly fast, first few 100 milliseconds of the neural processing. And then when there's competing source of information, your anterior cingulate cortex actually gets activated to try to weeds out those information. Selective attention can actually be beneficial. So think about it in education setting, when you actually want to focus on studying instead of, getting distracted with other things. So it can be trained and enhanced. So one of the things that actually enhance it is action gameplay and mind-body training. I think the mind-body training, it's a little bit more of a, it's more reasonable, I guess. So because the whole point is meditation, you're trying to kind of look into yourself and ignore all outside stimuli. The action video gamers, that's a little bit interesting. So multiple studies have shown that video gamers more efficiently suppress the distracting information and focus on the task at hand and ignoring other sources. I guess that makes sense too. If you think about, kids that are playing video games and ignoring everything else. And then also, and like I talked about, the meditations, it's been shown to across different meditation styles, it enhance selective attention. Once the information gets to kind of the higher level processing center, one of the things that you think about is carrot or stick. So if you've had this happen to you before in terms of the different options, then you basically, well, it makes sense, but you try to do things that gives you reward and avoid things that punishes you. So this idea was first discovered by B.F. Skinner. It's officially called Operant Conditioning. The idea is that the consequences of a response is determined by the probability of it being repeated. And the behavior will be reinforced, the behavior that's reinforced will be likely to be repeated, and behavior that's punished will occur less frequently, which makes sense. And he actually conducted his experiments using animals, either rats or pigeons, and he placed them in the Skinner box. And this is an example of the Skinner box. So the idea here is that the rats or the pigeons or the rats are supposed to pull a lever. And then if it's a positive reinforcement, then the pellet will dispense, and then the rat will obviously keep pressing the lever. And sometimes the rats have to press the lever to prevent shock. These are kind of metal things that are connected to the electricity. That's kind of cruel, but that's that. And then they can, in terms of the stimulus, they can differentiate it between neutral operants, which is basically neutral, like it says, reinforcer. Basically, every single time the rat press the lever, it'll give the pellet, and then punisher. And that's the electric grid there. So this is pretty interesting also. How often should you give the carrot to the rat? So they actually experimented on different patterns of reinforcement and actually got different effects in terms of the speed of learning and extinction of learning. So there are 3 patterns that they use in terms of kind of the reinforcement. So continuous reinforcement, fixed ratio or interval reinforcement, or variable ratio interval reinforcement. And the data that they get is the response rate, which is the rate at which the rat pressed the lever. And this represents how hard the rat is working. And extinction rate, which is the rate at which the lever pressing dies out, which means that the rat just stops pressing the lever. So continuous reinforcement, and in this particular experiment, every single time the rat press a lever, you give a pellet. Every single time they do that, you give a pellet. And the response rate is slow and the extinction rate is fast. So what it's saying is that because the rat gets the reward every single time, they're not working as hard compared to these other ones that I'll talked about. And then the extinction rate is fast, meaning that the idea is if the rat presses a lever and you stop giving the food, it'll stop pressing the lever right away. So the next experiment that they did was a fixed ratio interval reinforcement. The idea is you give them rewards after a certain number of fixed behaviors or interval, meaning that after 5 lever presses, then they get a reward. Or after 5 minutes of at least 1 lever press, they get a reward. So the response rate is fast / medium, and the extinction rate is medium. The idea is that, especially in the fixed ratio where they have to press 5 lever or do 5 lever presses to get the reward, they'll work really hard at it. They'll press the lever 5 times to get the reward, and they'll keep doing that. And they, because there's a interval, their extinction rate is medium. It takes them longer to realize that they're not getting a reward. Lastly is variable ratio and interval reinforcement. The idea is the rat doesn't know when the reward is gonna come after they don't know. So sometimes it could be 5 lever presses, sometimes it could be 10, or sometimes it could be 5 minutes, sometimes it can be 10 minutes. So, so in this case, the response rate is fast, meaning that the rat will keep trying until they get the rewards, and then the extinction rate is slow. Just because it's unpredictable, they don't know if, by pressing the lever, if it's gonna, the reward is gonna come or not. This actually is applicable in real life. So an example of this would be the slots in casino. So, because you don't know when the reward is going to come, so you're gonna work hard at it. And once the reward comes, then you're actually gonna keep going at it. So something to think about for the attendings that are listening. So stick and punishment. So this is actually different from negative reinforcement. So there's a subtle difference. The subtle difference is that punishment is when when somebody or something does an action that's not appropriate, you punish them, you give them what have you. A negative reinforcement is you're trying to elicit a response. So the idea is you want patient to start eating healthy so they avoid being sick. So that's more of a negative reinforcement. So in psychology, they actually don't like punishment. The problem with punishment is the punished behavior is not really forgotten, it's only suppressed. So the idea is once that punishment is gone, then the behavior will return. It can cause increased aggression. Well, that's, yeah. And it creates fear, and that can generalize to undesirable behaviors. And I think this is more important, the last point. It is that it does not necessarily guide you towards the desired behavior. So the idea is, you know, it tells you what not to do, but it doesn't tell you what to do. So, that's that. So in terms of carrot stick, probably carrot is the better option, and you have to space it out. Okay. So a little bit of break from me talking. Here's a video.
We should probably order food if we're going to be here all night.
Yeah, let's do it. You guys want Chinese?
Sounds good.
Oh, yeah, that'd be great.
Hell yeah. Let's do Ming Moon. They close in 5 minutes, though. So just tell me what you want to order. I'll call it in.
I'll have the General Tso's combo.
Sorry, do they have a menu?
Yeah, I mean, theoretically they have one, but you know, it's a Chinese food restaurant, so they have you know, Chinese food.
Okay, well, let me just look at that and then I can decide.
Okay, well, they're not on Yelp, so there is no menu to look at. But even if there was, you know, it's Chinese food, right? I mean, you wouldn't need a menu for ordering pizza.
Wait, are we getting pizza? Because then I definitely need to see a menu.
No, we're not ordering pizza. We have exactly 4 minutes until this place closes, all right? We're not getting pizza. And even if we were, none of you should need a menu, right? It's the same toppings always, forever, everywhere. And we should all know generally what we like by now. Look, you've had Chinese food before.
I don't know. I'm not sure.
You're not sure?
Come to think of it, I really would love to take a look at a menu, because what if I want to change things up?
Grant, if you want to live out in some fantasy world where you make new and exciting decisions, be my guest. But we all know when the chips are down, you're getting beef and broccoli, pork fried rice, and an egg roll like you always do.
What if they don't have General Tso's, though?
They will have General Tso's.
But what if they
What
don't?
if they don't?
I promise you that they will have something exactly like General Tso's.
I just don't know what I want unless I pick it off the menu.
Okay, that's fine. That's totally fine. Here's what you can do. Using the power of your imagination, construct a menu in your mind's eye consisting of all the Chinese food meals you've enjoyed over your long lives. Then, using that mental menu, tell me what you want to order.
What if they don't have dumplings?
What if they don't have dumplings?
As God above is my witness, Grant, they will have dumplings.
But are they on the menu? Because it'd be really rude to ask if it wasn't on the menu.
Menus are for cowards and simpletons, Trap. Persons of character look in their heart and know what they want to order.
Do you always know what you want to order?
I haven't looked at a menu in 24 years.
Bullshit.
Try me. Thai. Pad See You. Thai iced tea.
India.
Chicken tikka masala garlic.
Italian.
Chicken parm.
They're out of chicken.
Chicken piccata. Go to hell. You first.
A genie grants you 3 wishes.
World's greatest sorcerer. New magic lamp. Freedom for the first genie.
You're at a diner where you can mix and match. Menu's 10 pages.
Cheeseburger deluxe, medium well, bacon and grilled onions, waffle fries filling that, curly fries filling that, regular fries, and a chocolate goddamned milkshake.
You're going to give yourself a heart attack.
You're gonna give me a heart attack. 2 minutes.
So what? You order the same meal every
You're
time?
the best meal every time.
You have a cheeseburger for breakfast.
Gladly.
What if you're not in the mood for a cheeseburger?
Then I'd be in the mood for a Western omelet with cheddar cheese, whole wheat toast, home fries, and a cup of coffee with some happen. I wouldn't need a menu to know it.
So you only have 2 moods? Is that it?
2 moods is enough for anybody.
You're insane.
1 minute.
General Tso's combo.
Wonton soup.
Beef broccoli, pork fried rice, and an egg roll.
I knew it, you slime. You need a number 1, a number 3, a number 5, a number 7, a wonton soup, and an egg roll for pickup. Thank you so much. Have a great night.
So this brings me to my next point, or next concept. So heuristics. So the idea is not every decision that you make in your daily life require big, takes time. So our brain is very smart. We have these mental shortcut, and we make decisions quickly without having all the relevant information. And sometimes it sacrifices finding the most optimal solution for speed. And like that video shows. So these are some of the mental shortcuts, concepts that we know. So one, it's affect heuristic. Basically, it uses emotion to influence decision. So if you made a decision about a certain thing before and it gave you good feeling, then you most likely will do that again in the future without having to go through all the steps again. Next, you have the availability heuristic. Basically, it's immediate examples that come into mind when evaluating a decision. The example is news. So one of a good example is that if you think about who dies more, is it somebody from a shark attack, or is it somebody who gets hit by random airplane parts? Most of us will say it's from shark attack. And actually, statistically, it's actually from you're getting hit from an airplane part. But the point of that is that shark attacks always kind of get on the news, and so that's one things that come into mind right away. Next, familiarity heuristic, and this is something that they use especially in economics and consumerism. So people favors familiar over novel places, people, and things. So if you buy a brand, say Apple, and you like their iPhone, most likely you're gonna buy the iPad and all sort of things from Apple. And lastly, peak and end rule. So it's basically judging an experience based on how it's felt at its peak and at its end. So think about it as if you're taking a vacation. If for some reason you get sick on the vacation, that's really all you remember from the vacation, even though it could have been a good or an average vacation. So so that's that. So next, so when you make decisions, so far we've been talking about decisions where it's made in isolation, but in the real world, your decision is affected by other people's decision. And so this is kind of the concept of game theory. So it's basically the study of mathematical models and strategy interactions between different agents, which produce outcomes with respect to the preferences of those agents. So it's formally created and studied in 1944 by John von Neumann and Oscar Morgenstern. But the theory insights, it's dated back all the way to the ancient times. And this game theory concept has been used by military leaders before in the past and influenced their strategies. One example is Cortez landing in Mexico. So the story is that this guy, Cortez, obviously from Spain, came to Mexico with kind of all his crew. And obviously there's already indigenous people here, the Aztecs, and they are outnumbered. And so what he did was he actually burned all of the ships, their ships. So the idea is that he's trying to narrow the choices of his troops. So now that all the ships are burned, they can't really go back, and the only thing they have to do is fight the Aztecs. And the second reasoning for burning the ships is actually to show the Aztecs. The idea is that even though they are outnumbered, the Aztecs actually look at this action in terms of burning the ships as like that this guy is so confident that he's going to win, whatever war. So what actually happened is actually the Aztecs ended up not fighting the Spanish, and they actually retreated. So that's one of the examples there. And then the most famous game theory game is the prisoner's dilemma. I don't know if you guys have heard of this before, but but basically, in this game, you have two criminals that were just arrested and they're in prison. And they're separated in two different solitary confinement, and they can't talk with each other. So the prosecutor, they don't have enough evidence to convict both of them on the principal charge, but they have enough to convict on a lesser charge. And each of the prisoners is given the opportunity to either betray by testifying or to cooperate with the other prisoner by remaining silent. And And of note, the criminals are more or less strangers to each other. They don't know each other. And then there's no opportunity to reward or punish the other partner for their decisions. So in a diagram, this is what it looks like. So you have prisoner A, you have prisoner B. The idea is that if both of them confess, they'll get 5 years, 10 years, what have you. If one of them confess and then the other one remains silent, 0 year for the one that confessed, and then the other guy actually gets punished for lying in for the actual principal charge. So it's 20 years, and then vice versa on this side. And then if both of them remain silent, they'll just stay in prison for 1 year. The logical thing to do, obviously, is for both of them to remain silent, because they get less in total years. Because here you have 10 years, here you have 20 years, here you have 20 years, and here you only have 2 years. But in reality, and in the game theory, what happened usually is this one here, where both of them actually confess. The idea is that if you break it down, so think about as just the prisoner A. So you look at this this row and this row here. So confess versus remaining silent. So if, say, prisoner B confess, so what's going to happen to you is either you get 5 years or you get 20 years. So here, obviously, it's better to get 5 years. And in this column right here, so if prisoner B gets silent, you get 0 year versus 1 year. The idea here is that the optimal thing for prisoner A to do is to confess, because if you're comparing strictly by the years, he's actually better off in terms of that. And it doesn't really, it's not dependent on what the other person is doing. So that's what they usually call the Nash Equilibrium. And that's really what most people do. And there's actually a game show about this in somewhere in Britain, I guess, about basically they play a lot of mini games and they win money. And at the end, what they have to do is between split or steal. So if both of them chooses split, then they split the money. If both of them chooses steal, then nobody gets the money. And if one person choose split and then the other one choose steal, the one that choose steal gets all the money. So this is actually, this episode probably broke the game, and then they stopped having the show. But you should kind of see this. This is pretty interesting, actually.
If you both pick the split ball, you split the 13,600 and you go home with 6,800 each. If one of you chooses the steal ball and the other chooses the split ball, whoever chooses the steal ball goes home with the whole lot, 13,600. But if you both choose the steal ball, you leave today's game with what you came with, nothing. It's the ultimate test of faith, trust, and let's face it, greed. Take a moment to look at the balls in front of you so you know for definite which is split and which is steal, but obviously keep them concealed from each other. Just have a look. Okay. It's the easiest choice, but the most difficult one. What I want you to do is to spend half a minute talking to each other about what you both should do. Nick, Ibrahim.
Ibrahim, I want you to trust me. 100%, I'm going to pick the steel ball.
Sorry, you're going to...
I'm going to choose the steel ball.
You're going to take...
I want you to do split, and I promise you that I will split the money with you.
Well, after you took the steel.
Yeah.
You're going to take steel.
Yeah.
I'm going to take split.
Yeah.
So you take the money.
And I will split it with you.
After the show.
Yeah. I promise you I'll do that. If you do steal, we both walk away with nothing. I'm telling you 100% I'm going to do it.
I appreciate that. Right, I'll give you another alternative. Why don't we just both pick split?
I'm not going to pick split. I'm going to steal, Ibrahim. Honestly, 100% I'm going to steal.
It's in your nature to steal.
No, I'm honest, and I'm going to tell you.
You're an honest man.
I am. That's why I'm telling you I'm going to steal. If you do split, then I will split the money.
I can't see myself doing that.
Okay, well, I'm going to steal, so we're going to leave with nothing.
Where's your brains coming from? I can't work out.
I know that I'm a decent guy, and I will split the money with you.
Well, we should just both split then.
No, I'm going to do steal.
There is no legal
I know there is.
for him to give you the money.
Of course. If I gave you my word, now let me tell you what my word means.
Okay.
My father once said to me, a man who doesn't keep his word is not a man. He's not worth nothing. Not worth a dollar.
I agree.
So
Ibrahim, I'm going to steal. So you've got the choice. You either steal, and we both walk away with nothing. Because you know, I've told you my intention, and I've told you that I will split the money with you, Ibrahim.
if I gave you my word that I was going to split, I would split. And you're going to take steal. So
the only way you can guarantee to walk away with 6,800
is by sharing.
to guarantee that you both put the split ball in. And I do now have to push you for a decision. It's a tough one.
We've lost it. We've lost everything.
Okay. Lost then.
We're walking away with no money because you're an idiot.
No, that's
You're
not.
an idiot. You're an idiot. That's what's right. You're an idiot. You're an idiot.
This can go on all night. And these people have got to get up for breakfast. Nick, choose split or steal. Ibrahim, choose split or steal. Now, please. Choose a ball.
Right, I'll tell you what, I'm going to go with you.
Okay.
I'm going to go with
I promise you I will split it.
You cannot change your balls now. Split or steal? Yes, congratulations, you're both split.
So I don't know if you guys catch this, but he actually, despite what the audience thinks, he's actually fairly smart. He's basically what he does is that he forces the other person to be in this situation where, you know, the better option for him to actually confess, or I'm sorry, hold on. So to, yeah, he said he's going to confess. And so the other person can either confess or remain silent. But yeah, basically, so the idea is he's forcing it, and it's the better option for the other guy. And then, like I said, the game show actually shortly after this was canceled just because people would use this strategy for it. And lastly, the last thing that I want to talk about is that, you know, in decision making, historically, emotion is regarded as irrational and decision making. You know, it causes you to make a rational decision. But now multiple studies have shown that emotion is actually one of the most important factors in decision making process, especially in fairness related decision making. There's actually this model called the wounded pride spite model. The idea that feelings of wound and pride actually arouse from a person who gets an unfair offer. And what they do is they actually reject the unfair offer and is actually even at the expense of themselves. But if the responders can convey their feelings about the unfairness to the proposers, the acceptance rates can be increased substantially. And then this is the last video that I have. And yeah, sometimes you feel this way during residency, but it's okay.
So a final experiment that I want to mention to you is our fairness study. And so this became a very famous study, and there's now many more because after we did this about 10 years ago, it became very well known. And we did that originally with capuchin monkeys, and I'm going to show you the first experiment that we did. It has now been done with dogs and with birds and with chimpanzees, but with Sarah Brosnan, we started out with capuchin monkeys. So what we did is we put two capuchin monkeys side by side. Again, these animals, they live in a group. They know each other. We take them out of the group, put them in a test chamber. And there's a very simple task that they need to do. And if you give both of them cucumber for the task, the two monkeys side by side, they're perfectly willing to do this 25 times in a row. So cucumber, even though it's really only water in my opinion, but cucumber is perfectly fine for them. Now, if you give the partner grapes, the food preferences of my capuchin monkeys correspond exactly with the prices in the supermarket. And so if you give them grapes as a far better food, then you create inequity between them. So that's the experiment we did. Recently, we videotaped it with new monkeys who had never done the task, thinking that maybe they would have a stronger reaction, and that turned out to be right. The one on the left is the monkey who gets cucumber. The one on the right is the one who gets grapes. The one who gets cucumber, note that the first piece of cucumber is perfectly fine. The first piece she eats. Then she sees the other one getting grape, and you will see what happens. So she gives a rock to us, that's the task. And we give her a piece of cucumber and she eats it. The other one needs to give a rock to us. And that's what she does. And she gets a grape. And she eats it. The other one sees that. She gives a rock to us now, gets again cucumber. She tests the rock now against the wall. She needs to give it to us. And she gets cucumber again. So this is basically the Wall Street protest that you see here.
And like I said, that's sometimes how you feel during residency, but it's okay. And that's really it. Thank you. Any questions, concerns, issues? So great. Okay. Correct.